Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, July 24th, 2020. I wonder if I'll ever change that introduction to the video. I've had this for about 3 years now, that same exact saying, introducing the date the same way and introducing the video that I'm doing. I'm kind of used to it by now, so I probably won't, but, just a thought that I just had 10 seconds ago. But today we're going to be talking about these, I guess you could say not just 3 or 4 new polls, but 4 new states that have recently been polled by Fox News, Gravis, and that's pretty much it. They've released us data for the Senate elections in Michigan and then the presidential races in Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, and Pennsylvania. And the reason why we're focusing on these 4 states in particular is because they were all a part of the blue wall back in 2016. These were states that were solid for the Democratic Party. I guess you could say expected to be solid, didn't actually end up coming true. Minnesota was expected to be double digits for Hillary Clinton. She ended up winning there by 2%, and 3 Rust Belt states almost they did flip, but Minnesota almost joined them and flipped. Minnesota, the reason why that would be notable is because it is the state with the longest Democratic streak as of today. Minnesota is the only state that did not vote, I believe, for Ronald Reagan back in 1984 and has been with the Democrats since 1976. So, looking at that state, it would be pretty important. If that state had flipped, it would officially say the end of the entirety of the blue wall. At least the Democrats have a little bit of a silver lining in Minnesota and obviously Illinois, but other than that, they didn't really have much blue in this part of the country in 2016. So the Democrats have been, vigorously trying to win back these 3 states in particular and retain the state of Minnesota. And they are crucial. Donald Trump would not have won the election without these 3 states. He won them by less than a percentage point. So it is important to note that President Trump was actually very competitive in these 3 states as well on election day. The mainstream media expected the races to go to Hillary Clinton, some of them by pretty solid margins, but at the end of the day, based off the data that we had, Donald Trump was always in a competitive nature in these 2 states, and then not so much in Wisconsin, but that was the only state that was really fundamentally flawed. Now we're seeing, these pollsters have adjusted for their errors 4 years ago, and now we're starting to see Fox News come out with a poll with a double-digit lead for Biden in Pennsylvania and Minnesota. I think Pennsylvania makes a little bit more sense. The amount of times Vice President Biden has mentioned that he's from Scranton, Pennsylvania, numerous times on the campaign trail in 2008 and 2012. I'm not going to attribute Obama's victory in Pennsylvania solely to Joe Biden. He absolutely would have won without Biden on the ticket, but I will say that definitely did help, and it never hurts if you're from that state. Joe Biden was born in Pennsylvania. For Minnesota, this is the start of the Black Lives Matter movement. Obviously not. This has been around for years, but the Black Lives Matter movement as we know it back in May of 2020, I would say this is probably the epicenter. This is the first showdown that we saw between the police and protesters. And this was the, start of the thousands of protests that have occurred across this country. In fact, the Black Lives Matter movement is comparable to the likes of the Civil Rights Movement. We are seeing as much energy and as many protests as we saw, decades ago, half a century ago, more than that. But besides that, we're talking about Minnesota, which was a state that went to Hillary Clinton. Right now, Donald Trump doesn't seem to be gaining on any of his support from 2016. If anything, he's lost support in a number of these solid states for him. They have since reduced down into likely states for him. Let's take a look at the electoral map. I know I made a video about this earlier, but it does need to be mentioned. Indiana is literally where Vice President Mike Pence is, and it's rated as lean Republican. South Carolina is typically, a safe Republican state, considered to be lean. In fact, considering that Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana, which I do understand that RCP does like to be very safe with their characterizations, these races were not competitive in 2016 by any means. And data actually indicates that Joe Biden could bring these states within, 10% in Mississippi, which Obama did, within 15% in Louisiana, or possibly within 20% of Arkansas, which obviously isn't a victory by any means. Still goes to Donald Trump, and I think we all acknowledge that. But definitely an improvement for the Democratic Party. And if they're improving in Arkansas, they're improving in Texas, and they're improving in Michigan, and they're improving in Wisconsin, which this all data, correlates and says, well, Biden's doing pretty well right now. So while Biden is only up by around 8% nationwide, I know that's a very weird saying, only up 8% against an incumbent president. Romney was never that close. In 2016, Hillary Clinton was never able to garner the amount, the lead that Joe Biden has nationwide. However, she did get that in these 3 Rust Belt states. Minnesota wasn't polled too often enough that they didn't even have a graph for it on Real Clear Politics, just because nobody thought it would be competitive. Now, I mean, we've adjusted for our errors, and if you take a look at the swing from 2016 based off the polls versus the actual results, still ends up with the Biden victory. In Wisconsin, this is a state that Hillary Clinton was ahead by 6.5%. We're starting to see the exact same numbers. The only difference is the pollsters are doing it right, as they did in 2018. They did a complete, overhaul of their old systems and worked through their errors, and, were pretty accurate just 2 years ago. So the reason why we're focusing on these 3 states being likely for the Biden campaign based off these datas, +8 in Wisconsin, +9 in Michigan, +11 in Pennsylvania, +13 in Pennsylvania. +11 in Pennsylvania, +13 in Minnesota. It's important. I mean, these 3 states should be super competitive. Donald Trump needs them to win his reelection bid. So if these states are making an 8 to 9 point, in some states, 10-point turn in favor of the Democrats, what's to say Iowa won't join the bunch? Iowa went to Trump by 9% in 2016. It should not be competitive this time around, okay? Iowa should be a Republican state, and now it's considered a toss-up. But if it swings by the amount that these swing states have, based off the data we have right now, Iowa could absolutely be competitive, possibly a Democratic state. Ohio, same exact thing, could be competitive. And that's just assuming the Rust Belt is the only part of the country that we're seeing tides turn, and it's not. We're seeing it in Florida. We're seeing it in North Carolina. We're seeing it in Georgia. At this point in time, tomorrow marks 100 days to the election. President Trump was not at this bad of a position in 2016. I'll tell you that much. Even at this point, he was not at that bad of a position. I think Clinton led by maybe 0.3% today, 4 years ago. So with the 100 days to the election tomorrow, which I'll be making a video tomorrow talking about the electoral map then, because 100 days does mark an important milestone up until the election. We're not going to see any favorable ratings for Donald Trump, at least from my channel. And I know some people think, I have a left-wing bias, First things first, I have my own personal opinions, and they don't seep into, I guess you could say, my channel. There are some things that I will tell you what I personally believe in, but I tend to not, put all of my positions out there. Obviously, I'm allowed to have them. I'm a human being, and my opinions are my opinions. But I don't tend to let them seep into my election predictions. I honestly, it doesn't really matter who I support for the presidential election. I will likely look at that electoral map the same way. As a lot of the people that, if you look at the political betting markets, that's the perfect example of, regardless of who they support, they will likely go with what the data is telling them and which states are expected to go to each individual candidate. And that's exactly what I do. So when you see me cover videos like this, don't be too surprised. This is all the data that we see. Do you see how much blue is on this map? The only times Trump is ever leaning in, it's in Texas. This is a state that was solid for the Republicans 8 years ago. Okay, the only other time where he's leading, Missouri, Montana. Look at all the rest of the swing states. All it is Biden plus, whatever you see. I mean, Biden seems to be dominating. And Biden is also helping a lot of down-ballot races. The reason why I'm also covering this is because the Michigan Senate race, as much as the Republican Party would like to tell you that Michigan is a toss-up, shout out to Toss-Up Bot, but, looking at Michigan, it's not a toss-up. I don't care what you say. It's going to Gary Peters, regardless if Trump wins Michigan or not. Donald Trump is going to, outperform John James's margin, at least maybe narrowly, but if it's enough to put him over the top, if the race all of a sudden narrows down in November, I don't see a pathway for John James. You can't run a failed candidate from 2018. Doesn't matter how well he performed against Debbie Stabenow. I understand there are exceptions, but take Martha McSally for an example. She probably won't win this election. In fact, she's probably just as bad at a point as John James is at this 100 days out to the election, or 101 days out to the election. And Gary Peters seems to be outperforming Joe Biden in every single scenario. Even in a a Republican wave year in 2014, I understand that he wouldn't exactly have the best candidate. I think John James would have performed better, but it's 2014. He should not have had, a solid state. That's almost a safe margin at that point. And as much as Debbie Stabenow's more well-known than Gary Peters, and in a Democratic wave year, she was underperforming based off the polls and also off her actual election margin. So I do expect Gary Peters to do well on Election Day in Michigan, and all data seems to indicate that as well. Something drastic would have to happen in order for John James to win that Senate race. So that's another race that the Democrats no longer have to worry about. Now those remaining 13 Senate races, 11 of which I believe are held, 11 of which are held by the GOP. That's excluding, if I'm not including Michigan, I guess it's 12 races, and that's only including Alabama, so 11 out of the 12, whatever, doesn't really matter. The point is, the Democrats are at a very good position in Michigan right now, in the presidential race and the Senate race, but it's not just Michigan. It's every single swing state in the Rust Belt. Right now, Wisconsin an 8-point lead for Biden. This was Trump's largest margin of victory out of all three of the states. Granted, it was 0.77%, literally 22,000 votes, but an 8-point lead for Biden is very strong. In Michigan, a 9-point lead. Clinton was up 3% on Election Day, lost it by 0.27%. The closest race out of them all, 11,000 votes decided those 16 electoral votes. Michigan, a 9-point lead from both Gravis and Fox News. Fox News is the better rated pollster, by the way. In Minnesota, Biden leads by 13%. And here's the thing. Here's the big difference between Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton sure has led Donald Trump by, margins sometimes comparable to this, but she never hit that 50% mark. There were two other candidates, Jill Stein and Gary Johnson. Hillary Clinton was never able to hit 50% since she won the nomination in July. She was never able to get that majority vote that Biden consistently hits in almost every single swing state poll. In Michigan, he's at 51. In Wisconsin, he's at 50. In Minnesota, he's at 51. In Pennsylvania, he's at 50. In fact, his lowest number, 49% of the vote, which means that remaining 11% undecided, all he needs is 1.1% of that. Okay, so that puts him at a very good position. He needs 10% of those undecided voters to put him over the top. And I can guarantee it, he's getting way more than 10% of the undecided voters in these states. So that's pretty much it for this video. I just wanted to cover those new Fox News and Gravis polls that just got released. I think they're very interesting considering that they cover all the states that I talk about, specifically those three in, or four, I guess you could say if you include Minnesota. I just slurred them all together there. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. I read a lot of the comments, so if you have a suggestion that you want me to do, comment it down below. Please consider subscribing on the left if you haven't already, and I will see you all tomorrow.